Good afternoon and welcome to another Creative Talk Online. My guest today is Jules Older, who is someone who's a little bit different to the normal Creative Talk guests we have in that he's a psychologist, he's an author, and he's a medical educator. Good afternoon, Jules.
Good afternoon to you.
Kia ora and welcome to the Pump House.
Thanks so much.
Now, I can tell from your accent that you're not from around these parts, a bit like me. So could you tell us a little bit about how you got to New Zealand?
I got here twice. In 1972, with very young twin daughters, my wife and I left New York, escaping New York and a guy named Nixon to come to this promised land. And we stayed here till 1986. Would have stayed longer, but I had a new boss who made it clear that he would be happier if I were anywhere else. So we left, we ended up in California. And exactly 2 years ago, in 1980, while taking a walk, wearing masks, worried about this new thing called COVID, and despising Trump, we said, we could do this again. And 3 weeks later, we were on the plane with one-way tickets.
With one-way tickets. So obviously leaving your family behind in America, or did they come with you?
Yes and no. The first time we dragged the twins, of course.
Yeah.
The second time we have one twin daughter in California and one in Auckland who lives about a kilometer from us.
Right.
So one of them had to put up with us for many years. Now the other one has to.
So what are the changes that you noticed about coming to New Zealand from 72, you said, to 2 years ago? There must have been a lot of changes.
Well, when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, everything's changed except the name. And then, of course, the name has changed too. Aotearoa, New Zealand, no one ever heard of that other word.
Right.
So it was just New Zealand then. And one of the biggest changes is related to that, the Maorization of the country. So when we lived in Dunedin, we knew more Maori words and phrases than almost any non-Maori person we knew. Probably we were number one.
Right.
And now every school kid in the country knows more words than me, knows more sentences than, and pronounces everything better than I do.
Yeah.
So that's a major change. Now, if you don't believe this, back then, a telephone operator was fired from international telephonery for saying kia ora.
Wow.
And now she's a dame for services to New Zealand and the Maori people. So that's a major change.
Yes.
And words, back then, Kiwis sort of knew kia ora, and some could sing Tūturu mai ngā iwi, but that was it. And now if I said, be brave, or what's the word for family, or a bunch of other words, everybody knows them.
Yeah, yeah.
I like that change.
You like that change?
Oh, I think bilingual people tend to be a lot smarter than monolingual people, and I speak as a monolinguist.
Right.
Yes. I wish I were more bilingual, or multilingual, actually.
So you mentioned that you came out here because of your work. Was that?
Yes.
So what work were you doing here in New Zealand?
Well, I was hired to design and run the first behavioral science course, which is theology, psychology, sociology, anthropology, as related to medicine at Otago Medical School, which most New Zealanders don't realize is the world's southernmost medical school. So we went from New York City to a place called Dunedin in the South Island. It just sounded so incredibly different and exotic, and we loved it.
So tell me a little bit more about what the kind of things that you would do when you say you designed the course.
Well, I was granted a big chunk of a medical student, third-year medical student program so I could put anything in it I wanted to. And I brought in everything from pediatricians showing children from birth on, feminists with a radical idea that breastfeeding might be something good.
Right.
And I had breastfeeding mothers in front of the class, which in 1972 was a shocking, perhaps horrifying thing. 2 ways Maori deal with death, which I see then and now as far superior to the way the rest of us handle it. So lots of stuff. I would routinely bring in the northernmost doctor in New Zealand, Dr. Bruce Gregory, late Dr. Bruce Gregory, who was himself Maori and had many Maori and Pākehā patients. And I followed him around for a week and followed down for the course. It was a wonderful experience.
Yeah. So you're sort of a groundbreaker then in bringing things to a head.
Yes, and my boss was Basil James, was really a groundbreaker in bringing the psychologist, I'm not a medic, in to teach this course from a foreign language almost, foreign ideas, and for the time, wildly progressive ideas like this breastfeeding thing.
Yeah. So I also read about you that you've been a children's author in your time.
Oh, I hope I still am. Right. Writers don't retire. We just write. So I've got a couple of children's books that I would like to sell if you're anyway. Yes, my wife and I both write kids' books.
Right.
I write. My most recent publication is in the New Zealand Doctor, and it's about nocturia. Do you know that word?
Nocturia. Is it something to do with something at nighttime?
Yes, it's
going
peeing a lot of night, which men over a certain age do, and some women too. So I have what I call the take 3 solution to it, which is pee, read your emails for 3 minutes or so, pee again, and go to bed, and you stay in bed, so you don't have to get up 10 minutes later cursing, as I did before this. That's it.
So do your just to go back to your children's books? What kind of children's books were they? Were they stories? Were they picture books?
They were based mainly on my own kids, who are well remembered as difficult kids, and they were really a typical family. They fought each other, and they, she's touching me, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's all in the book. And then I wrote humor column for Major Airline, and I incorporated a lot of the family travails and that, like trying to get my kids to do stuff that was good for them, which they had no intention of doing. So our night at the Sydney Opera House was a disaster, not just for us, for everyone sitting within half a mile of us. Our kids, very young but very vocal children, commented on everything that they were watching on stage very loudly. The more people shh them, the louder they got. And the more we threatened them, the louder they got. We left at the intermission to everyone's relief. Yes.
And I also read that you edited a ski magazine.
I did 2 ski magazines. I love skiing, and I became a ski writer.
Right.
And then I became the editor of a couple of ski magazines, one in Canada and one in the US. And that was just wonderful fun.
So when you say a ski writer, what does that mean?
Well, it's a terrible job. Someone says, would you like to come to our ski area in California and write about it? Yes. And that's what happened.
So you like reviewing the ski resorts that you go to?
Often in some comic way as well, but certainly writing about the experience. It wouldn't be so much as a straight review, but tying it into whatever else is happening in that area or some character that I met there, or occasionally what the art in Whistler, British Columbia is like when you're not skiing. It's great fun.
Yeah, sounds it. In my head, I had you down as somebody who was following all the champion skiers around, like the tennis tour. Yeah. And you were reporting on them, but that sounds much more exciting and getting.
I couldn't keep up with the champion skiers. Yeah. There's no chance of that happening. I was never a great skier, but I was a pretty good writer.
Right. So since you came back to New Zealand 2 years ago, and you said you've just written your article, what other things have you been doing that have sort of are different to when you were here before?
Well, one difference, take a not quite sleepy town in Northland, but one that has no apparent cultural connections. And in Whangarei put up this radical museum, the Hunterwasser Museum. And we were just blown away by it, astounded, delighted. And of course, I wrote an article about that. And we often shoot what we call mini movies about. So that's another change in New Zealand. There's been an expansion of culture here, which extends to places like the Hunterwasser. And we have several other sort of radical museums here, some indoor and some outdoor. Gibbs Farm is an outdoor example. But also in things like food. Our first meal here in New Zealand was a Chinese meal on Queen Street in Auckland. This is 1972.
Right.
And the first thing that the waiter did was put down a big stack of white bread and butter at a Chinese restaurant.
Right.
And I knew that was wrong. And it was wrong. It was probably the best part of the meal. It was just awful food. They'd been in New Zealand so long, they'd probably been here since the gold rush.
Right.
And they were Kiwis. So Chinese food starts with a stack of white bread and butter. Now, that would never happen. And if you don't like that particular Chinese place, there's a Thai place next door and a Turkish place over there and 2 Iranian restaurants. You have the world at your palate. And that is a major difference in New Zealand and a really good one.
So when you came out in 72, you were in Dunedin.
Yeah.
Have you been back to Dunedin since you've come back?
Yes. Our good friend Dave Cull, who was the mayor of Dunedin, but before that was my wife's partner on television on a show called Of Course You Can Do It and The Renovators. He was on his last legs. He died last year. And we went down to see him and to see old friends down there as well. So yes, we have been to Dunedin and I still enjoy that place a lot.
Has it changed much?
According to Dunedinites, you won't recognize a thing. It's so different. According to my eyes, exactly the same.
Right.
A couple more coffee houses. They've improved the Leith stream, but it's Dunedin. It looks like it. It feels like it. And I'm very pleased to say that.
Right. Great. So now you're here in Auckland.
Yes.
What have you noticed that's different about Auckland from when?
Let's go back to doctors. When we were here before, any doctor you dealt with, you called doctor, Dr. Smith, Dr. Jones, any news, Dr. Brown. Now, the first thing my new Auckland doctor said, call me Claire.
Right. So
there's an informality in medicine that I know is extended beyond medicine. And I think that's a very good thing too. In fact, now that we're saying it, I think almost all the changes that I see are almost all are positive. When we got here in 72, just before we left New York, people would say, "You're going to New Zealand. Where is that? Do they speak English? Is that part of Australia? Is there a bridge? Why are you doing this?" This time, 1980, 2020, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
They all say, "Oh, New Zealand. Oh, I love your prime minister. Oh, I want to move there. Oh, will they take me? I'm 50 years. Oh." Everybody knows us because of Jacinda.
Mm.
And I think the two defining things were her response to the Christchurch massacre and her initial response to COVID.
Yeah.
So when we got here, essentially there was no COVID.
Mm.
And when we were left San Francisco, we knew people dying of COVID.
Right.
So I think she's made a much bigger difference to the rest of the world than the way a lot of New Zealanders say, "Yes, Jacinda, good on you, girl." But the rest of the world sees, well, if you're American, Trump or Jacinda, that's kind of easy.
Mm-hmm.
But also Brits, Australia, everybody loves this woman.
Yeah.
Including me. I haven't met her.
You haven't? I was just about to ask her, had you met her?
No, I would love to. No, I just think I'm not promoting the Labour Party here.
No.
And this is just my reaction to her.
But
I think she's the most person. Yes, and the most open government leader I can remember. Maybe Obama is a close second, but she's number one. Right. And the rest of the world sees her exactly.
Yeah. I certainly get the same feedback from my family in Europe. Right? Yeah. They all wish that she was in charge in the UK.
Yes, Boris didn't help that along.
No.
Yeah.
No. So now do you count yourself as a New Zealander, or are you an American that's living in New Zealand?
I'm very much both. I'm a dual citizen. My whole family, now 3 generations of us, dual citizens. Mm-hmm. When I was traveling as a travel writer to New Zealand probably about 6 years ago. Mm-hmm. By invitation, a group of very good North American travel journalists and me. And I was the only one who had been here before, and certainly the only one who had lived here. And I was traveling with open eyes of a travel writer, tourist, until some guy at Wellington Airport went all assistant principal on us. There was some dot not dotted or T not crossed, and he said, "Oh, I'm afraid you can't get on the plane." And I was instantly outraged as a New Zealander. Right. You're showing these people what kind of thing is this? They're coming to look at us. I had just got off a plane myself. So I'm very much both. When I'm here, no, I would say more New Zealand than American, except my whole background is American and I speak American. No, I'm both. I'm an insider out.
An insider out. That's good way of putting it. Yeah.
I imagine you have the same experience.
Similar, although I've not been here quite as long as you have. But yeah, I'm a dual citizen as well now. So yeah.
Isn't it great to be that?
It is. But I've not travelled much as a New Zealand citizen, because as I got my citizenship, we got COVID. So
yes, inconvenient.
Yes, yeah. So you've done travel writing as well as your skiing writing.
Oh, very much.
Medical writing.
Yes.
Writing for children.
Yes.
Is there any kind of writing you haven't done?
Poetry.
Poetry. Would you like to write poetry?
No, I would not like to write poetry. I have no skills at it, but I am trying I'm 82 years old, and I'm trying to write the lyrics for country and Western music.
Ah,
And I think I have a wonderful collaborator who actually does music.
right.
And I'd love that to happen, and I have no idea why. I'm a Jewish kid from Baltimore. I did not grow up on country and Western, but it grabbed me as soon as I realized there was such a thing.
Hmm. So that could be the next thing we hear from you, is your country and Western song being played on the radio.
With a great deal of good fortune, yes.
I'm sure that'll happen.
It helps to be bold, which somebody leaves his country, his home, and his car, and his family in 3 weeks. We have boldness, my wife and I, built into us.
Right.
And it helps not to be afraid to try something new. I recommend both to anybody who wants to do that kind of thing. It's brought us to New Zealand across the universe from our previous lives. And what a great move that has been for us.
Right.
Watching the changes in the country that you see as someone who comes back, that's a great. Here's another change. This one, oh, let me give you two more. One is when we lived here, I predicted something. Many of my predictions are wrong. This one was right. There were probably half a dozen old kuia who had the remnants of a moko on their chins. Mm-hmm. And I said, I believe the moko will come back. Well, it's back much more than I expected. And when you see someone on television as a newscaster with a beautiful moko, and you see someone in parliament with a full, I mean, this is something that distinguishes us from the rest of the world. Mm. Another change, which I'm not quite as sure of, because it could be COVID related, I kind of hope not, is I think dads are spending a lot more time with their kids. Right. I see it in the parks here. I see it along the bike paths. My feeling is it was much more moms in the past, and now I see both doing it. And I see that as a really positive thing.
Yeah.
Probably connected to not going into work, but working from home. I'm not sure about all that, but yeah. I like the change.
You like the change.
Yeah.
Oh, so nowadays, now you're still writing.
Yes.
Writing your songs. Do you still have anything to do with the medical profession?
Well, the last time I published in a medical journal was 1988.
Right.
And the most recent time was a month ago in the New Zealand Doctor, this Nocturia story.
Yes, yeah.
So, yes, and I think I've just been made an honorary clinician at Auckland University Medical School. So I do have connection to it, yeah. And I'd like to keep it.
Yeah. Do you have any connections with the performing arts?
Well, Roger Hall, the great playwright, is a dear friend of mine from Dunedin days.
Yeah.
He hasn't hired me to act in any of his plays for one good reason. I'm not much of an actor. But I had the amazing experience of being a villain on television in a show called Against the Law.
Right.
And I got this, I wanted to see how they made a television show. And they were casting for extras. Mm. And I waltzed in just before they closed down on a Saturday and said, I can't talk because I've got an American accent. It turned out that the gentleman who was the star of this show, because he killed people in the South Island and was hung for his crimes, of course, was American. Right. And I got the job. I got the role. And God, it was great fun. Mm. So I have some connection with the arts, but they're tenuous. Right. I'm also a member of a great group, which I recommend to, I know you have many arts people around you. I'm part of the Ockham Collective, Ockham.
Mm-hmm.
And each year they choose 12 creative people. And this year they chose 11 and me. And it put on performances, encouraged teaching, many things, but all in our own creative sphere, which includes harpist, cellist, writers, definitely writers, and all kinds of other things too.
Right. And
so,
where could people see these performances?
There is one coming up on, I think, the 17th of August. That will be our first one. I'm not part of it. I've just come back to the country.
Yeah.
But that will be post or in COVID times, the first big production.
Right.
I'm still a little afraid to go anywhere with COVID, so I may or may not be there.
Right. And which venue would that be at if people wanted to know?
Look up Ockham, Ockham, and you'll find it.
Okay. So you're hoping that a bit further down the line you'll be presenting
anything
you've written, anything.
Yes. Yeah. I love to talk. I love being on radio, and I've had a lot of radio experience here. I was recently on Jim Mora talking again about nocturia.
Right.
But this is the kind of thing I like to see medical people, psychology people who can actually talk English still. They haven't been, yes, you understand what I mean.
Yeah.
To use those skills and talk to people about what's happening in the psychological or medical world. So that's been a pleasure.
So as we're coming to the end of our talk, what would you think has been your favorite achievement or the favorite thing that you've done?
With my wife, raising a wonderful family.
Right. Yeah. Good answer. Good answer.
That is it. Yeah. No one's ever asked me that before. I've never had to think about it before. I'm going for that. Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to thank you for joining us for our creative talk today.
Thank you, Max. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Hopefully we'll see you around at the Pump House sometime.
I would love it. We've been there many times. With your kids' productions are terrific. And we've been bringing grandsons there.
Yeah. Yes. We'll come along and see some of the adult stuff as well.
That's the thought.
Yeah.
Get rid of this COVID thing first, okay?
Yeah,
and
we're trying our best. We're trying our best. Thank you.
Thank you.